Hi everyone! Today we'll be looking at how to find the slope when given 2 points of a line. Make sure to write this FLT down. Given 2 points of a line, I will be able to find the slope by using those 2 given points. So how can we find the slope if we're given 2 points? Let's take a look. So last time we looked at how to find the slope by looking at a graph, but this time we're focusing on how to find the slope of a line when you're given 2 points. So we have that the slope of the line passing through 2 points, so x sub 1 comma y sub 1 and x sub 2 y comma 2 is given by the following formula. The slope m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Let's break this down a little bit. So last time we talked about how the slope is the rise over run, or like the change in y over the change in x. So the change in y is described by y sub 2 minus y sub 1, and the change in x is described by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And I know that the notation can feel confusing at first, but y sub 2 is simply the y value of your second coordinate, and y sub 1 is the y value of your first coordinate. Similarly, x sub 2 is the x value of your second point, and x sub 1 is the x value of our first point. So the idea remains the same, where we do rise over run, or the change in y over the change in x, but instead of looking at a graph, today we're going to plug in values given some points. For our first example, it says to find the slope of the line passing through 2, 1 and 3, 4. If we look at the graph, we can tell that the slope is 3. But you won't always have a graph. Maybe you're just given 2 points. So let's make sure we can use the formula as well. So I always like to label the points first, like this, so that I know what x sub 1 equals, or like x sub 2 equals. So I like writing it out. So right here, I know that x sub 1 is the x value of my first point. So I know that x sub 1 equals 2, and y sub 1 equals 1. And then we look at our second point, x sub 2 equals 3, and y sub 2 equals 4. I labeled each part of the coordinate points, so I know what, for example, y sub 1 equals, or like x sub 2 equals. So now we can just plug these numbers into our formula. So our formula to find the slope is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And then we're just going to replace these with actual numerical values. So y sub 2 equals 4. So I'm going to write 4 minus 1, because that's y sub 1. X sub 2 equals 3. So 3 minus 2, because x sub 1 equals 2. So right here, I looked at what I labeled each value as. So for example, I know that y sub 2, those are the ones right here, I found that y sub 2 equals 4. So I replaced y sub 2 with 4. And I knew that y sub 1, the y value of my first coordinate point, is 1. So that's why I replaced y sub 1 with 1 right here. Looking at the x values, x sub 2, the x value of our second coordinate, is 3. So I replaced x sub 2 with 3. And then lastly, x sub 1 is the x value of our first coordinate, which was 2. So that's why we have the 2 right here. You can pause the video once so that you can review how we replaced each value right here. So the next step is just simple arithmetic. So first I look at the numerator. So what is 4 minus 1? That would be 3 over, and then the denominator, 3 minus 2 equals 1. Notice right here, we can do 3 divided by 1, which equals 3. So we found out that our slope is m equals 3, just as we see in the graph. We used a formula to find the slope of a line given 2 points. This time, we're just given 2 points. We don't have a graph. So we're going to find the slope of the line passing through the points 0, 2 and 3, 3. So right here, we're going to use the slope formula. But first, let's label each part of the coordinates. So we have our first coordinate, which would be x sub 1, y sub 1, and we have our second coordinate, x sub 2, y sub 2. So let me write out what each value is. So x sub 1 equals 0, and y sub 1 equals 2. X sub 2 equals 3, and y sub 2 equals 3. Again, I labeled each part of the coordinates. So let's start plugging this into our formula. Our formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So let's replace this with the actual given numerical values. Y sub 2 equals 3 and y sub 1 equals 2. So we have 3 minus 2 over x sub 2 equals 3 and then minus 0 because x sub 1 equals 0. So y sub 2 is the y value of our second coordinate, which in this case is 3. And then y sub 1 is our y value of our first point, which in this case is 2. And that's why we replaced y sub 1 with 2. X sub 2 is the x value of our second point, which in this case was 3. So that's why I replaced x sub 2 with 3. And then the x sub 1, we replaced it with a 0. So at this point, always try to double check your work to make sure you've replaced the values correctly. So let's move on. The numerator, we have 3 minus 2, which equals 1, over the denominator, 3 minus 0 is just 3. And we can't simplify anymore. So our slope is m equals 1 over 3. So we use the formula to find this slope, but here's the graph so that we can check our work. Notice that if we find the slope graphically, our slope is 1 over 3. So we use the formula correctly. Yay! So please try this example on Edpuzzle. Find the slope of the line passing through these points, 2, 1 and 3, 6. Start off by labeling the coordinates so you know what like x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, and y sub 2 are. And then plug it into the formula. Alright, next let's find the slope of the line passing through -4, -3, and 3, 2. Notice we have some negatives here, but don't worry, it's all still the same. You just got to be a little more careful when you're doing like adding and subtracting. So looking here, I have the 2 points and the line going through it. Graphically, I know that my slope is going to be 5 over 7, but I want to make sure by using the formula. So I'm going to start off by labeling all the x and y values. So I have my 2 coordinates here. And so x sub 1 equals -4 and y sub 1 equals -3. Over here, x sub 2 equals 3 and then y sub 2 equals 2. And then we use the formula. So the formula again is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And so let's start replacing each one. So first of all, y sub 2 is 2 minus y sub 1 is -3. So we have 2 minus -3. For the denominator, x sub 2 equals 3. And then minus x sub 1 equals -4. So for the denominator, we have 3 minus -4. Please pause if you need to take a look at how I replaced each value with an actual numerical value. So for example, like y sub 2 equals 2 and like x sub 1 equals -4. So take a look at how I replaced each value. Right here it's a little different from earlier. Notice we have the double negatives that turn into just positives. So like negative of -3 is just +3. And then negative of -4 is just +4. So I know it might look a little small, but 2 minus -3 is simply 2 plus 3, and 3 minus -4 is simply 3 plus 4. So let me rewrite this. For the numerator, we now have 2 plus 3, and for the denominator, we now have 3 plus 4. Okay, so now 2 plus 3 equals 5 in the numerator, and then 3 plus 4 equals 7 for the denominator. So our slope is 5 over 7, like we saw in the graph. So even if we have a negative number, like a negative coordinate, we still use the same steps. So with that idea of the double negatives becoming a positive thing in your head, please find the slope of the line passing through -2, -4 and 2, 8. Next, let's find the slope of the line passing through -4, -4 and 2, -2. So what do we do first? We label each part of the coordinates. So our first coordinate is x sub 1, y sub 1, and our second coordinate is x sub 2, y sub 2. So we have that x sub 1 equals -4, y sub 1 equals -4, x sub 2 equals 2, so positive 2, and y sub 2 equals -2. Again, if you feel like I'm going too fast, remember you can always pause the video to really put the information in your head. So our slope formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And I'm going to replace each part. So y sub 2 equals -2, and then we have minus -4, because that's y sub 1. For x sub 2, we have that it's 2, and x sub 1 equals -4, so we have 2 minus -4. So I know I might be talking a little fast here, but it's just so that the video doesn't end up like as long as the Titanic movie. But remember, again, you can always pause and rewind as necessary. So notice we have some double negatives here that I'll just turn into pluses. So rewriting it, we have -2 plus 4 over 2 plus 4. So again, I just rewrote this because a double negative becomes a positive. For our numerator, -2 plus 4 is positive 2. And then our denominator, 2 plus 4 equals positive 6. So I have 2 over 6, but notice that I can still simplify this. 2 and 6 have a GCF of 2, so we'll divide both the numerator and denominator by 2, again because the greatest common factor is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3, so our slope is m equals 1 over 3. And so make sure to simplify when you can, but notice that when we look at the graph, the slope m equals 2 over 6 and the slope m equals 1 over 3 still results in the same line. We just always want to simplify fractions so that it looks simpler. Go ahead and look back at previous examples if you would like to, and then try this example on your own. Find the slope of the line passing through -9, 10 and 21, 15. And you can always use a calculator right now to check your work. For this example, we're going to find the slope of the line passing through -1, 3 and 4, -2. When we look at the graph, and when we look at this line going through the 2 points, Notice that it has a negative slope. So let's make sure we get a negative slope when we use the formula. So first things first, let's label each part of the 2 points. So x sub 1 comma y sub 1, and I also have x sub 2 comma y sub 2. X sub 1 equals negative 1, y sub 1 equals 3. X sub 2 equals 4, and y sub 2 equals negative 2. So let's plug this information into our formula. Make sure you write down the formula correctly, because if you don't have the right foundation, you're not going to be able to have the correct answer later. So y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. This is our formula for the slope. And let's start replacing each part. So try replacing on your own and then compare with what I do right here. So y sub 2 equals negative 2, and y sub 1 equals 3. So we have negative 2 minus 3, and then x sub 2 equals 4, x sub 1 equals negative 1. So at the bottom we have 4 minus negative 1. So this is how we labeled and replaced each part of the coordinates. And then now let's move on to adding and subtracting each part. So we have negative 2 minus 3, which is negative 5, over, and then the 4 minus negative 1 becomes 4 plus 1, which equals 5. So we get negative 5 over 5, which can be simplified to negative 1. And then so m, our slope, equals negative 1. So here, as we see in the graph, we got a negative slope. So this next example on Edpuzzle, just as a hint, you'll be getting a negative slope. So find the slope of the line passing through negative 2, 5 and 3, negative 1. And let's just look at 2 more examples. So this one, find the slope of the line passing through 5, 4 and negative 3, 4. Going to label each part of the coordinates. So think about what x sub 1 and all these other values are equal to. So x sub 1 equals 5, y sub 1 equals 4. Over here, x sub 2 equals negative 3, and y sub 2 equals 4. So the formula is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So y sub 2 equals 4 and y sub 1 also equals 4. So we have 4 minus 4 over x sub 2 is negative 3 and x sub 1 equals 5. So we have negative 3 minus 5. Here is the color-coded version to see how we replaced each part. The numerator, 4 minus 4 equals 0, and then negative 3 minus 5 equals negative 8. So I have 0 divided by negative 8, which equals 0. Because 0 divided by anything is always 0, so our slope is 0. So what would this look like on a graph? What does the slope of 0 mean? Let's take a look. So the line passing through these 2 points has a slope of 0, and notice how it's a flat line, like a flat surface. And for our final example, let's find the slope of the line passing through 3, 5 and 3, 0. Let's label each part. So we have x sub 1, y sub 1, and then x sub 2, y sub 2. X sub 1 equals 3, y sub 1 equals 5. X sub 2 also 3, and y sub 2 equals 0. Let's start writing out the formula. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Y sub 2 equals 0, y sub 1 equals 5, so we have 0 minus 5. X sub 2 and x sub 1 are both 3, so we have 3 minus 3. Your change in y goes in the numerator and your change in x, so the x values go in your denominator. So 0 minus 5 equals negative 5 over 3 minus 3 is 0. So we have negative 5 over 0, but this is undefined. We don't have an answer because you cannot divide by 0. So we have an undefined slope. If your denominator is 0, your slope is undefined. And looking at this graph, notice that the 2 points, or the line going through the 2 points, is a straight vertical line. There's no change in x. We're not running left or right, which is why we had 0 in the denominator, and thus making the slope undefined. So as a review, say you're given 2 points of a line, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. You can find the slope of the line passing through these points using the following formula. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Remember to please submit your notes on Canvas. Thank you.